Hello, everyone. Welcome to another discussion of the Wheel of Time television series. This time, Dr. AP Canavan and I are going to be discussing episode 7 of Wheel of Time. So, yeah, this is a big episode, a kind of a big reveal. Lots of things happening. So, lots of expectations for this one. But first, AP, how are you today? It's great to see you.
I am doing very well, Philip. And just to start with, there's 2 points that have to be made right off the bat. Number one, we are lucky that the Wheel of Time only has 8 episodes a season because I can count that high, and that's important. Um, so, getting up to episode 7, I'm so yeah, I still have enough fingers.
Yep.
And the second thing is, I had to bust out this jacket because
Wow.
you can't be the only one with flame retardant tweed on, because I've seen some of the fireballs that you've been throwing my way on your channel.
I gotta tell you, AP, I was gonna remark on the jacket. That is a seriously really snazzy tweed jacket. And I am okay, I hope you understand the this is a testament to my friendship with you that I'm willing to admit that I'm a little bit envious here of that tweed jacket. That is really, really
It
wonderful.
also has, I don't know if I can get the light on this, but it also has like a really nice lining.
Oh, it does. I see the lining. Oh, now I'm really jealous. Huh. I don't know what to say. I mean, that's a really wonderful jacket. So yeah. Dr.
Tweed
Fantasy
envy is a
approves.
terrible, terrible thing, Philip.
It's terrible. It's terrible. I never thought I'd have tweed envy, but here I am. So, but Dr. Fantasy approves. Very nice. Very nice. So, all right. Well, let's start talking about this episode. AP, since you are the guest, I would like to allow you to start about what are your impressions of the episode? What would you like to start with?
Well, first off the bat, I liked the episode. I think it is building on a lot of the elements that have been built up during this season. It resolved, obviously, who the Dragon Reborn is, which was a mystery that kind of that they had built into the season. Because again, like when we think about it from the character perspective, not necessarily from a viewer perspective or a reader perspective, but
Right.
from a character perspective, the idea that you can know for a certainty about something in the world
Yeah.
is actually quite difficult. And the fact that these characters were almost certain, they were kind of sure, but the stakes in this are so high
Yeah.
that seeing it build up to this, if they'd been certain really early on, I think that would have actually detracted from some of the verisimilitude that they're trying to build into the world.
Uh-huh.
And regardless of whether or not this aspect of the mystery worked for you, because let's face it, some people will think it was unnecessary. Other people will think, well, okay, I get the hook, but it went on too long.
Hmm.
But I think when we see the entire season of the 8 episodes, and if you sort of binge watch them, I think you'll see that it actually moves through it quite quickly, that it's not left unresolved. One of the reasons we feel that it has gone on for so long is it's been released weekly. And
Hmm.
we've had multiple weeks to consider it, to chew over every single element of the narrative and keep building it up and building it up. And that has been great in terms of the marketing for the show. It's been great in terms of viewership getting involved in discussing the show and bringing people in.
Mm-hmm.
But I think at the end of the season, if you just watch all of it, you go, actually, they got through it quite quickly. It didn't last as long as I thought it did, because when I watch all the episodes back to back, it makes perfect. It doesn't go too long. And I
Yeah.
think that's part of the reason why the emphasis on it is going to be slightly different, because it's streaming, when we rewatch it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the first thing.
So the
The
dragon,
other thing,
who the Dragon Reborn is, where that
yeah.
whole mystery and all that, in case anyone didn't catch that. So yeah,
Um,
good.
but the second thing I wanted to bring up was I thought the opening for this was brilliant, because it proved why I keep telling you that
Hmm.
capes are a bad idea.
Oh, I will say that prologue, I'm calling it a prologue,
Yeah.
is the best orchestrated fight scene in the entire series so far. I think. I thought it was, the choreography was really quite good, and it was a really powerful, convincing opening sequence. I thought, to have the Isle woman in combat, pregnant. Now, I've never been pregnant, obviously, and
Really?
no, I mean, I haven't, no. And I've never been pregnant and in combat, like 9 months pregnant in combat. So, I mean, that could be an incredibly hard thing to pull off. I thought they did a really good job with that. And her grunting and being in pain while she's trying to fight these guys. And obviously she has by far the superior skills, which fits with the whole world building, where the Isle are these very feared, very just powerful warriors. So that was cool. I liked that scene a lot. It was a powerful opening, best choreographed fight scene I've seen in the series so far. That's my opinion, anyway. So it was good. Very, very convincing opening.
It's interesting because, again, that scene illustrates some of the tensions we see between being faithful to something in the books and putting something into a visual medium,
right,
and also slightly altering things for the sake of a new audience. So what I mean by this is, obviously the Isle always have their masks on. They
right.
Not the shawl. What do you call that across the face?
Veil.
Veil. They always veil when they go into combat, and we start by seeing her veiled, and then obviously she thinks that she's gotten to a place of safety. She takes the veil off to aid with breathing because she thinks she's about to give birth, and then gets surprised and gets involved in all this combat.
Right.
And in the novels, you would expect her to pull her veil back up again at the earliest available opportunity. But because it's a visual medium, people like being able to see it's the actor doing things.
Sure.
And it's quite often why in a lot of TV shows they have people riding motorcycles without the helmet on or anything, so you can see the face. So you go, it's the actual actor doing it, not a stunt double. And it's to play into trying to get you to buy into the actor, the character, and it's a point of connection for a lot of people because we like to be able to see people's faces. So there's a tension between visual dramatic storytelling and what is kind of true to the lore of the books.
Yeah.
And it's the same with fantasy armor. This is a perennial problem in almost all visual adaptations of a lot of high fantasy works or epic fantasy works, because fantasy armor quite often is looks over substance. And you see this stormtrooper armor, it doesn't protect them from anything.
Yeah.
Fantasy armor, oh look, they get poked with something and it goes right through their armor like butter. Again,
yeah.
It's a tension between trying to serve a compelling dramatic story and an authenticity and verisimilitudinous nature of the world. And there's always going to be a tension between the two and a balance between the two. And that balance will fall flat for some people. And for other people, it'll be absolutely fine. Because for everyone that complains about, the fantasy armor, it's absolutely terrible. People go, but did you see the detail with the bees on it? That was really cool because that corresponds to the fact that they're the elite warriors. And did you notice X or Y?
Right.
And that's fine. But one of the things that always strikes me as curious about this is people complain about a lot of the armor. It's the thing that everyone who's a fantasy fan has at some point gone, that armor's really silly. But no one has complained, as far as I'm aware, of the fact that Rand has been walking around for months on end with a strung longbow.
Right.
Which that string,
is
the string isn't going to work anymore. He needs to unstring it when he is carrying it and then restring it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, the tension in the bow would have gone, the tension in the string would have gone. It's absolutely useless. But he's had it on his back for over a month, and no one has a problem with that. You just go, but that makes no. You wouldn't carry it strung the entire time.
No, you wouldn't. You absolutely wouldn't. Yeah. But as a bit of storytelling, I thought that the prologue was effective because
Yeah.
yeah, just a nice reference point there that isn't immediately explained, but you sort of put it together. And if you've been listening, of course, if you're a book reader, you know what it was, right? You see Tam show up and you know what that is. But as somebody who's just watching the show and coming to this story for the first time, I also feel like it's a very effective bit of storytelling because of how it foreshadows a lot, and it's obviously an important piece of the past, and putting that piece in place kind of helps with the big reveal that happens in the episode. So I thought that was effective as well as a prologue. I think they've been doing a good job with these prologues, which are based on the lore, based on the books, but they are not necessarily exact, reproductions of moments from the books. So I appreciated the prologue. I thought it was effective.
Yeah, and like even tying it back in later on when they are talking, when Rand is talking to Min in the bar. I was like, that's not where we met Min in the books. That's not
no. Yeah, we met her much earlier in the books, I think, right? Yeah.
But that scene where she says, but when I was a child, I saw Tam with the baby, and it awakened this ability in me, and it ties it all in, and you can just see this sort of thematic focus running through these lines of narrative connection running through what is in this first season. And that to me, it again shows an attention to detail. Now, some people will say that it's attention to detail in the wrong places. And that's fine. You don't have to like every change. But it's not the same as saying they don't know what they're doing.
Right.
And I really like that aspect of tying in her visions and how she came by her ability, and tying it back into that prologue, and then tying it into the flashback of Rand and Tam going through the forest and him trying to get him to safety. And basically Tam spilling the beans about his adoption,
right?
And that was a scene that people were, why wasn't that in earlier? And you go, and what they did with it in this episode, which I liked, was Rand has had these inklings that maybe he's the Dragon Reborn.
Exactly.
And we see that whole sequence where he's firing his arrows at the target and missing.
Right.
And it's tied into, he's upset about the argument. He's upset about Egwene. He's upset with all of this stuff bubbling in his head. And then sort of, it's almost like he makes a resolution. He accepts that he is the Dragon Reborn. And we got those flashbacks of all of those different elements from the show earlier in the show.
Put it all together.
Shown now from his perspective.
Yeah.
And it adds back in the one power being used, him using it. As he accepts it. And so those firing the arrows, the flame and the void, which Tam taught him about, finding that acceptance and balance in his life again, because he has accepted this essential truth.
Yes.
And suddenly he's hitting the target. He's bullseyeing every single one.
Yeah.
And for me, that was good storytelling.
Good metaphor. That bullseye is a good metaphor. Yeah. Yeah, no, so, I totally agree with you. Yeah, I mean, I loved, you explained it so well. But everything being put together in that moment, and it's like, bullseye, Rand. Yep, it's you. So yeah, it was brilliant. And I do actually like the way that you thought it was Egwene who thought she had been the one to channel. And she was, I didn't realize I did it even, and we later figure out, oh no, actually you didn't. It was Rand. Who channeled, which of course tells you, oops, well, he might just be the Dragon Reborn.
But what's even better about that is it ties into a previous scene in a previous episode where, if you remember, Swan was saying, oh, the strongest channel of our generation, and you could see Egwene getting all puffed up, and then Nynaeve, and the look of shock and almost disappointment on Egwene's face. And again, it's these little moments of characterization. Egwene always thinks it's her. She thinks she's the center of things, which when we go back to the books, and she does have that slightly self-centered approach to the world.
Well, she's the student who sits in the front of the classroom and is always raising her hand and knows all the answers. And she's a lovable, but definitely a high achieving, individual. So who wants to do well. There's a bit of her too that wants to please. as well. So that explains a lot of her relationship with both Nynaeve and Moraine, I think. But also, I admire how she just wants to do the right thing, and I think that that's a deep conviction in her too, and that's all tied together. So I enjoy the character very much. Yeah.
And one of the I know how they when they were traveling through the ways, and like Loyal is the one navigating.
Yeah.
And I think one of my quibbles about this episode was basically when they get to the city, where does Loyal go? Like he just disappears. There's no reference to him. He's just not there. And then they all meet and what are we going to do now? And oh, we're all talking. You go,
Yeah.
but I know you left Matt behind, but did you also leave Loyal behind? Where did
Yeah.
he go?
Speaking of Matt, you were right. It appears the last time we talked, you had this speculation that maybe that was the episode where he was like, bye, for whatever reason. And they had to sort of get rid of that character temporarily. So there's no Matt at all in this episode. So it appears you might have been correct in our previous discussion.
It's unfortunate because we don't know how he would have been incorporated into the episode, and we don't know how that caused them to have to suddenly very quickly rewrite certain scenes, and what they had to come up with basically on the fly to go, we now have X gap in this episode, what are we going to do with the cast members that we have, the set that we have, write a scene that fits in there. Sometimes it's very easy to look at an episode and think, oh, I didn't like this thing, so they didn't do that. Or I didn't like this episode because there was an uneven transition.
Right.
And that, you know, obviously we have to judge the episode on what is on the screen. But at the same time, there are production issues, practical issues that go into making a TV show that sometimes can have a very significant impact. And can radically alter on the day what it is that you can actually do. And I think missing the actor who played Matt, I can't imagine that they'd intended this whole sequence to play out the way that it is. I would have imagined he would have been in this sequence somewhere. So that meant rewriting scenes and sometimes tweaking a scene or expanding the length of time that other scenes that they had, they went, we'll just lengthen this a bit because we're trying to fill X gap here and X gap here. So make that scene a little bit longer, that scene. Focus more on this now. And it is, I think it is something that is worth bearing in mind, even if it is just to temper expectations about fidelity or expectations about narrative flow, particularly these last two episodes.
And one interesting move that they made that I thought was effective without obviously the actor to be there to actually be in the scenes where they would have wanted him, when they had Moraine send a message to the tower, specifically to the Red Aja. Just when you were trusting Moraine, she kind of does a little dirty one on poor Matt there. So with the implication being, this guy's dangerous. She's been having these side conversations with Lan. He's got this darkness in him. It wasn't just about the dagger, you know, he attracted the dagger. And so we have to dispense with him. He's dangerous. And you kind of like, ooh, that's cold, you know, but understandable.
And, you know, in some respects, it fits with Moraine's character because she had said, I am absolutely dedicated to this. And I don't want to let him within 1,000 leagues of the Dark One.
Right.
Who do you trust more to really come down hard on a man in this world, the Red Aja who you send, but also what damage can the Red Aja do to him? They can't still him. He doesn't have the one power.
Or gentle him.
Or gentle him. Sorry, they can't gentle him. He doesn't have the one power.
True.
And so, so given how Moraine feels about the Red Aja and how she feels about Leandra, this is going to waste Leandra and the Red Aja's time. So for her, it's almost a twofer that she's going to annoy and waste the Red Aja's time. She's going to have someone find, locate, and make sure that Matt is actually taken care of without doing significant damage to Matt and keep him away from the dagger. So you can see, is it the best plan that someone could come up with? No, but it's not like she had months to come up with a great
Right.
plan. It's like,
On the fly.
what can I do very quickly?
Yeah, on the fly, pretty good plan, I would say. Yeah. So obviously, another thing we need to talk about, there are these very romantic elements that seem to have been developed in this episode that probably the one that I enjoyed the most was the interactions between Nynaeve and Lan. I thought that that was finally kind of that kind of moved somewhere in this episode. But I'm enjoying the on-screen dynamic between these two actors, the ones playing Nynaeve and Lan. I think they're doing a very good job with the material, and I love how this dynamic is bringing out the personalities of both of them. So I appreciate that element of the storytelling. And that is, of course, something that is derived, maybe not exactly the same way, but it's definitely derived from the books. So, and it's fun because you have this third element, which is Moraine, right? And so you have Nynaeve, who's clearly, jealous of the relationship that Lan has with Moraine. It's a kind of closeness that she doesn't have with Lan, but she is obviously romantically interested in Lan. And so it's kind of interesting how Lan is also trying to negotiate that as well as a warder, and he's conflicted. So it's a great thing that you can do as a storyteller is to bring conflict, and the actor's doing a great job of bringing that conflict right onto his face, right? And so is Nynaeve, who's not somebody who's normally going to openly admit her vulnerable feelings to someone, right? So for her to step inside the door and just kind of stand there, and there's a lot of looking into each other's eyes, and she's made herself vulnerable there, and she's kind of, do you want me to leave? I thought that was a really, I liked that. I liked that part.
And I really like the storytelling element of this because, first of all, so you're right. Nynaeve puts herself out there, but also as a wisdom, she, it's been set up that wisdoms don't take husbands. Right. She's going against who she thinks she is, and what she had chosen in life, and so this is a conflict for her because it's not what a wisdom is meant to do. And also there's that conflict of being jealous of Lan's relationship with Moraine. That's there, and yet she's stubborn. She knows what she wants and is going to go after it.
Right.
But she walks into that room. She makes the decision because Lan is left. The door is closed. She makes the decision. She is going to try this. She walks in and then she stops. Then Lan comes closer because, again, he has conflict because he's bonded to Moraine. He has this quest. He has this job and this duty. And this is something that he wants, but there's a conflict. And so he steps forward and then he stops and then she steps forward. And so you can see that they're both warring with elements of their personal desires against their sort of professional codes and what's going on. And the fact that revealing anything like this to someone is making yourself vulnerable.
Yeah. And these are not people who are accustomed to making themselves vulnerable either, right?
And I really liked how they did that because it showed the element of strength that both characters have. It showed the duty and dynamic that they have, but it also showed such fantastic chemistry between the two of them. Absolutely. I thought it was really well done. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fantastically well done. And Egwene's smug discovery of this the next day
it was
just one of those great moments where she walks in, sees the bed is unmade, and sits down and is like, oh, and where have you been then?
It was a good scene.
And I think a lot of the dynamics between the Emmonsfield 5, or 4 now, but were really quite well done in this because you can see the underlying friendships, the underlying history that they all share.
Yes.
And even in that argument about where Nynaeve has sort of gone, stop fighting over Egwene like she's a piece of meat to be won or something.
Right.
And, Perrin stands up, for Egwene, and he's standing up against Rand for his friend, who maybe he had puppy love for, maybe he had this thing, but he's still, he asserts, and we've no reason to disbelieve him, that he only loved his wife.
Right.
But he's racked with guilt about the fact that he killed his wife
Yes.
accidentally.
Yes.
And when they were on the ways, and was it Mashar Shin? I can never remember the name of the Black Wind.
Something like that. Yeah.
But it was whispering to him, "You deliberately did that because you love someone else."
Yeah.
And that thought, that insidious thought, working through his mind, and everyone is under pressure from what is going on. Are we going to die? What happened to Matt? We were all assailed by our darkest fears. Everyone's tension is so ratcheted up
Right.
that this is possibly the easiest thing that they could all argue about, because none of them want to deal with the complicated thing. Right. And think of how often we do that in our lives. I can't believe you left a toilet seat up, and it's a massive argument. And you go, this argument isn't actually about the toilet seat, is it? And it's not. That's the trigger for it. It's for everything else that isn't being discussed.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
I actually thought that was a good sequence for illustrating all of these tensions that they cannot bring themselves to talk about, and that's running under everything that they are feeling. So I thought it was quite good.
Yeah, I liked also the device of the wind in the ways, and that does a lot of character development for everybody there, because you're getting these conflicts, you're getting this sort of a sense of their inner insecurities during this scene, and it preys on that. It preys on their vulnerabilities. So it's a nice way actually of simultaneously developing all of these characters a bit and introducing a bit of conflict in them. And I agree with you that what Perrin probably had for a Gwen maybe was a bit of puppy love or that sort of thing, and then the wind was just sort of preying on that and inflating it into something else. And combine the fact that they're in a slightly stressful situation here.
just a tiny bit.
Yeah. End of the world, that sort of thing. These things come out and they kind of blow up. And in these moments of your jealousies, your insecurities all come out. And so I didn't mind that stuff myself. I really didn't. I thought that it was pretty well done.
I did have a quibble with the ways, and again, personal thing. That's not how I'd pictured the Black Wind.
Same here.
And even the ways themselves, I can see what they were going for, but it didn't match the way that I'd imagined it, and so it took a wee bit of, I sort of go, well, okay, fine, this is their view of it, but the thing that bugged me, and again, personal gripe. Nynaeve does another massive magic bomb thing. And I didn't like the healing bomb that she did in the earlier episode.
I know, yeah.
I like the shield bomb even less. Because this, I can understand the reason for it, about her anger and wanting to protect people. And this is her trigger for accessing her magic. But again, for me, it comes down to she's never been taught how to weave. She doesn't know how the magic works. And she just creates this brilliant, powerful, magical shield just because she's powerful, but has no idea what she's doing. And again, it is such a minor thing in the grand scheme of things. And it was visually, obviously, very, very impressive. And again, it's this tension between good visual storytelling. Look at this, isn't this amazing and impressive?
Right.
And I'm still sitting there going, but who taught her to do it?
Yeah. I think that we've often seen in this show, in this series, they often lean more toward the aesthetic presentation rather than the logical storytelling. But it is something, I think, in the Wheel of Time world, though, the idea that the one power emerges during times of great stress, right? I think
emerges in times of great stress, and she's able to do everything.
No, well,
come on.
Yeah, well, I mean, she's Nynaeve, so come on,
But I will tell you, there was a little cinematographic technique that they used that I thought was, this is a different scene, that I thought was absolutely brilliant. When Moraine and Lan and the whole crowd walk into the throne room,
right,
and I've forgotten the character's name. The king is sitting there, and
Oh, right.
he's higher up, and they have this sort of tension-filled conversation
Right.
because he's a bit prickly to the
Yeah.
Aes Sedai turning up, that they're going to tell him how to run his kingdom. And then you find out, he refers to his sister who is interfering. And you go, well, maybe that explains why he's a bit prickly. But when Moraine explains to him the problem with the ways, it starts with a very high shot looking down on Moraine, mimicking him looking down on her, his position of authority,
his
looking down on her, and you know your place. And as the information comes out, and as he realizes he needs this, the camera moves down until it is eye to eye, and that's when we get the respect that Moraine deserves. That it's moved from looking down on her to suddenly seeing eye to eye and mutual respect. And it is such a small thing that they do, and it just is one of those nice touches.
That's a great catch.
I like things like that.
Yeah, that's a great catch. I love that. Yeah, I didn't think of it, and I wouldn't have articulated it. But now that you're saying it, I'm looking back. Yeah, that's right. That's really cool. Yeah, very nice.
And your favorite character to spot that I don't see, Padan Fain.
Yeah, Padan Fain.
Or Padan Fain.
Padan Fain. Yeah. He pops up.
Me and names, bad idea.
Yeah. But yes, he's popping up, and he's sort of a bit of a loose cannon here, a little chaotic element. I think, especially if you haven't read the books, you're like, why is he following them around, right? And he's got that creepy kind of smile on his face, and yeah.
And the whistle, and I like that Perrin catches sight of him, and everyone goes, or Nynaeve says, "Oh, it can't be him." And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, where you've been in some random place, and you go, "That is that so and so from back home," and you go, "Oh, it can't have been." And then it turns out it was. That for whatever reason they were there. It was a staggering coincidence. This happened one time. I was in England, and a friend of mine from Belfast, I bumped into them in a city in England, and I'm like, "What the hell are you doing here?"
Yeah, it's surreal. What are you doing here? It's a little bit surreal, isn't it? That moment. Yeah.
And so you doubt yourself that you actually saw them.
Yeah.
But what the thing that I love about this, so obviously the ways in the books aren't opened with the one power,
right?
And Loyal even says, like, using the one power is going to attract the Black Wind.
Bad idea.
So how are you meant to get in and around and use the ways without using the one power? And I think this is actually quite clever. So yes, you can use the one power to open them, because if you extend the logic, this makes sense for a magical portal in a magical world where you use magic to open them. But there's another way to do it. And I think that's what's being implied with Fain, that he has a way to do this, not involving the one power.
Right.
And I think that is going to get round the difficulty of having the one power being the only way to open the ways. I think it's going to get revealed that yes, the in the books it's the little leaf that you can place that opens it. I think that this is a way of signaling that yes, that's still going to be the case.
Yeah, and of course there are Trollocs running around in there as well. And I liked what they did with Perrin, being the one who's sort of noticing things and seeing things and giving you little hints about where his character is going. He's the one who, while they're in the ways, sees way ahead. Oh, there's something up there, right? And no one else can see it. And there are torches in front of him which should be blinding him, but because he's in the back, but he somehow sees better. So he's got that night vision. Yeah, the wolf eyes. So I love that little kind of subtle insertion. They did some nice things like that.
And when Min has that vision of him, and it's that creepy vision of his eyes glowing and blood running down his face.
Yeah.
That, that's, if someone has a vision of you and that's their vision, that would be slightly worrying.
You think?
and Rand gets a vision of him holding a baby. You're like, okay, so Perrin's a werewolf.
Yeah.
And I know that's not who he is in the books, but
yeah.
Perrin basically looks like a werewolf. Rand is this doting father holding a baby.
Yeah.
But Min's little one-off thing to Rand, where she says, "I see circuses and 3 beautiful women." in this vision, which
Yeah.
hasn't happened yet. And
Right.
Rand then basically, am I going to come back from this? And of course, if Rand doesn't come back, how is that vision going to end up being true?
Yeah.
And so it's subtly basically telling you that he will come back from the eye of the world.
Yeah. So, I mean, but Min leaves things unsaid, which is understandable for someone in her position. For example, when she's looking at Moraine, and Moraine kind of asks her point blank, what are you seeing? And it's implied what Min's reaction or lack there, or just not giving an answer to the question. It's implied that Moraine is, her days are numbered, so to speak. So,
So you have that foreboding. But
yeah,
the interesting thing I thought about what she said was she said the Amerlin seat.
yes, the
Not
betrayal. Yeah,
but not necessarily
yeah.
Swan.
Not Swan. Yeah, she should remember her own trick where she switched, a Merlin seat with Swan Sanche, and now it's the Merlin seat. So yeah, yeah,
And this is something that we've seen that Swan is under pressure in Tarvalin, that
yeah.
there's a lot of political maneuvering. The Reds are moving into power. Her center of power is destabilized,
Right.
and she isn't as secure in her control. Like a lot of the politicking that went on in that episode that we got in Tarvalin suddenly now makes a lot more sense, because now we know that that is not the stable ally that Moraine used to have,
Right.
that she potentially is going to, and that I think sets up a really good hook for what is going to happen in season 2,
Yeah.
and the politicking of the White Tower and the storylines that stem from that. So
Yeah.
it's interesting how these things across this season are coming together, and I'm quite enjoying it. And again, I have quibbles. I'm not
You, AP?
effusive with
Quibbling?
my praise. Like,
Quibbling, AP? Huh.
again, like land teleporting out of a room.
Yeah,
So
that was a little,
Nynaeve
yeah, yeah.
is looking in the window. She looks away for a split second, and land teleports behind her, and you go,
Yeah.
"Oh,
I
really?"
know that they were that was a throwback to the episode where Nynaeve, surprised him, and he gives a little elbow in the rib there by, tracking you, haha. That was a little cheesy, yes.
But at the same time, TV shows do this all the time with an
Right,
edit, and you go, that should not be physically possible. Think of all those horror films
right.
where it's, someone is right behind them and they turn around and they're gone, and then they're walking, and then someone is right behind them again. Where did they go? Or Batman disappearing off the roof of Gotham PD. Like, that has become a joke now in a lot of the parodies and things, that Batman just disappears, and you go, he only looked away for a half second. Where is he hiding behind a waste bin?
Yeah, yeah.
It's something that gets done in visual storytelling, and if you think about it too hard, it breaks apart. But for the sake of the moment, was it worth it? And I think it was a funny moment, it
Yeah.
was an endearing moment, and it led to a really nice scene where
Yes.
Lan sets aside his stoicism, sets aside his armor, if you
Yes.
will,
Yeah.
because he's in the
Well,
safest
and his shirt
place
eventually too,
possible.
right? So yeah.
Hmm?
And his shirt too, eventually. Yeah.
You obviously are a big fan of more risque elements than me. You dirty beggar.
Well, I'll tell you what I actually did like. I liked how they ended the episode with Rand and Moraine both making the sacrifice. You mentioned sacrifice in one of our earlier discussions as a theme. And it is obvious that these two have, without complete certainty, I think about Rand being the Dragon Reborn. I don't think it's 100% here yet, but they have decided to spare their friends. They left, and I like how they set it up with the hand knocking on the door, and it turns out to be not. It turns out they have two sequences, in other words, that they blended together, and the hand turns out to be Lan knocking on the door to talk to Nynaeve and Gwen. In the meantime, Rand has knocked on the door earlier for Moraine, and I like how they mix up that chronologically in order to give us that all at once. A
and
bit of
and
mystery
even
there.
how is this possible? Because Lan and Moraine are bonded, and it's
Master
well,
Bond,
we saw in the Warder episode, and then
right?
we saw in the Tarvalin episode this whole thing explaining the Warder bond.
Plus,
And
Lan was a little distracted during the night.
but because the bond was masked,
Right.
and maybe Lan was going, I'm glad that Moraine masked that, so I can have a little bit of
Yeah.
quiet time.
Right.
Um, but we now have an explanation
Yeah.
for why he didn't notice that Moraine wasn't where she was meant to be.
Right.
And again, it's these things that were added in earlier are paying off
Yeah.
now. And I know they don't please everyone, and I know people would have preferred it to be done a different way. But when I see these points of connection, I go, I can see why they chose to do it this way, because it adds to these elements. It means these things don't need to be explained. That
Right.
Lan isn't coming in going, oh, she masked the bond, and that's why he doesn't need direct exposition now to explain to everyone else.
Right.
The
But it's
audience
also-
can follow along.
It's also just good storytelling to reinforce that theme. And is that exactly the way it happens in the books? It's been a while since I read it, but I don't think so, right? I don't think Moraine and Rand go off on their own, leave the others behind
No.
to go into the Blight. But I like that they have echoed that important theme from earlier episodes of sacrifice. And so I expect the other characters will probably try to catch up to them, in the last episode. We shall see. But I don't mind personally. And I know that some fans would be upset by these changes, and I'm not going to argue with them. But for me, it's compelling storytelling, and it worked for me. So I liked that the way they ended this episode.
Yeah, and again, there are things about the episode that I didn't think were brilliant, and
Right.
that's fine. Like, I have personal quibbles, but
Yeah.
on the whole, I thought it was a good episode. I thought it was building on what had been established. I think they're telling very obviously a Wheel of Time story. Like, this is the Wheel of Time.
Yes.
It's just not the Eye of the World as it was in the books. It's a variant. It's an adaptation.
Yeah, as Mike says in his reviews, it's another turning of the wheel, right? So,
you know what? I'm not overly fond of that expression, but I understand. I understand the reasoning for it.
right.
But it just feels very trite and cliched.
Oh well, he knows that, of course. He knows that. So,
but in all, I still enjoyed the episode, and to be honest, like I'm actually even glad they aged the characters up quite a bit, because
yeah,
from my memory of the Eye of the World, because they were so young, it was a lot more teen angsty all the way through. And at least this time there's been some arguing really backwards and forwards that feels believable, that they're out of their depth, but they're trying, and they're young adults, not teenagers. And it's trying to balance those two things. And again, when it comes to balance, sometimes it's going to work and sometimes it won't.
True.
Just depending on who you are.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are my sort of final thoughts on it.
Excellent. Yeah. So there's still some angst, but yeah, they've aged them. And Min also, I think, was aged. I don't remember her being that old. I like the actor playing the part, but
yeah, again, like the casting on this and the number of actors.
Great. Yeah.
The casting has been really good. The costuming has been really good. And even like some of the shots with the CGI, like the CGI baby Rand was a bit ropey. And then I remembered, I don't know if you ever saw it, but maybe your daughters did. The final films in the Twilight saga.
Oh no, I haven't seen any of those.
They had a CGI baby face that was something straight out of your nightmares. And that was something. That was a film with a film budget and a film CGI team. And they actually did a better job with the CGI face stuff in this than they did in a feature film that was going to be up on a big screen in high def that everyone's going to be staring at. And that CGI baby had the creepiest face in the world.
It was fine for me. At least they didn't put like Rand's face on the baby or something, you know?
That's nightmare fuel.
All right. Well, we're going to start to get a little silly. So that means it's probably time to say goodbye to everyone. But thank you so much, AP, for this enlightening discussion. I appreciate it very much. And once again, I am totally jealous of your new tweed jacket.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and thanks for the discussion. I really enjoy talking about fantasy stories. I like talking about, even things that we don't like, that we can have a chat about them and see different ways of seeing them. It still mightn't work for me. It still means I'm going to go, nope, still don't like Nynaeve's magic. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, like it's giving me a different perspective. So thank you very much for that, Philip.
All righty then. Bye, everybody. And we'll see you for the next one.